Good evening, Cedar Falls, and welcome to this evening's Finance and Business Committee meeting. We will begin tonight's meeting with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer. Here. Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have one topic on tonight's agenda, which is the continued discussion of the capital improvements program that had one committee meeting previously. It came to council for a vote and it was not approved. So we're here to discuss that further. We do have some slides prepared by staff, and I believe, Ron, are you going to give us a breakdown, or are we going to go right to Jen?
Yes, I sure
Okay.
can.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're here tonight, as the chair said, to talk about the capital improvements program again. Last time we had a 4-3 vote where the capital improvements program as a whole did not pass. Since that time, staff's been working with council members to figure out if there's a path forward. And I think we have some consensus that we've gathered up from meeting with each of you and seeing some of your concerns. What you'll see is we have 8 items, most of which have been talked about with council members. I think there's 1 or 2 items in there that staff has adjusted within the CIP or is suggested to. So in front of you, you have one of the large, 11 by 17 copies of the CIP. That is the same CIP that was agreed upon coming out of the committee meeting a month ago. So what you're going to see now is proposed changes to that CIP. So Jennifer is going to run through a number of the slides. What we're hoping to do is run through all of the slides and then come back and look at those and discuss those in advance. So,
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Administrator Gaines, and we'll go to Director Rodenbeck.
Thank you. We'll pretty much kind of go through these in order. Some of them are a little out of order just because of some of them kind of relate to each other. So we thought it was easier to kind of put them in that order. So the first one is a proposed change to number 35, which is the downtown parking ramp study. We heard really some interest in putting that study into FY24. And the study, may include things about location, design, feasibility, rate structure, possibility of a private partnership, and, a consultant contract, obviously, for that study would come back to council for approval. And like Chairperson Dunn mentioned, we thought we would just go through them all and then come back to each of them individually.
Yes.
But I think just to kind of give an overview first. Then kind of related to 35 is number 36, and that would be to move the parking structure back. This is proposing movement 25-26. We did hear kind of a little bit of a mix on that, whether it's 25-26, is it later, 27-28, is it just taking it off the CIP? We did hear a little bit of a mix on that one. But one of the things we can do is, obviously once a study's performed, we would probably have much better numbers in terms of what's a construction cost, where's it going. So I think, in terms of that item, it can be adjusted next year once we would know more after a study is performed. So I think whichever dates you want to move that to, that's open for discussion, but that's where staff would see that going. Number 53 is the Unidome renovation. So one of the things we talked about is doing just a little bit of a swap on this one, and that is that we would reduce the funding from $3 million down to 2.5, and we would take $500,000 of that economic development funding and put it towards the pool and reduce the GO money in the pool. And that's the very next slide. Those kind of relate together, so we can go over that again on the next one. So, and then just obviously at some point a 2080 agreement would come before you that we would do with you and I to talk about what are some other possibilities with that? Is there any possibilities for access to facilities? But again, a 2080 agreement would come back to you before any payment would be made to them. So the next one, 70, is the high school pool, and again, just kind of related to the one before, and that is leave the total contribution from the city at 8 million. It's just swapping out 500,000 of the GO to economic development funds, and obviously the GO, reducing the GO does have a direct impact on property taxes. So that's where this proposal came from. And again, there'd be a 2080 agreement with the school as it relates to, use of the pool, future maintenance. I mean, we knew we were gonna have that anyway as it related to sharing facilities. So again, a 2080 agreement would come forward to this body before contributions are made as well. Number 57, Cedar Valley Placemaking. You may recall this is the one that kind of came up recently, kind of middle of the year, and it was a joint project with some, a grant that came out from the governor's office and doing something with Waterloo, and so we did have GO funding in there. And we found out real recently that one of the things we had in there as it relates to bridge lighting is not going to be an allowable expense under the grant anyway. So when we talked to each of you, we talked about just removing the GO funding out of that one, just a little under 200,000. We thought we would still keep in the hotel motel parks money on there just in case there were some minor project costs that in the parks that might still be feasible. But we did take out the GO funding, so that would help reduce that as well. Like I said, just a little under 200,000. Number 59, comp plan and zoning code updates. And there right now, or before was about 125, 150,000 each year. So the proposal would be to lower the FY24 and 25 funding to 75,000. And that would include, well, I'm gonna step back, I'll say it an easier way maybe. We would lower the funding to 25,000 for each year, but in 24 and 25, add 50,000 to each of those 2 years, so a total of 75,000 in 24 and 25. And, I think that what that does is that 50,000 in 24 and 25 would be to update our comp plan. As we all know, the comp plan was last done in 2012. And then again, that 25,000 would be in future years to look at whether we needed some amendments to zoning. But again, I think what we heard is no new zoning initiatives, not continuing on to other areas at this point, just looking at if we needed to do some amendments. Number 64, resilience initiatives. Talked about changing the name of that to energy efficiency projects. Have the funding at the 25,000. You should have received an email with updates. I think last time there were some questions about what that's used for. Is 25,000 enough? So our public building supervisor and operation manager, they provided some information, mainly lighting updates as you saw in that. So I think for them, they felt like the 25,000 is still worth having in there to do those type of things. And then the good thing is that at your one committee meeting, you talked about removing the funding for FY24, but there is a lighting project in FY24 for the library. So in essence, we are kind of still doing something that year. Number 204, this is the one that City Administrator Gaines mentioned, that as we were having meetings with council persons, I happened to get a call from Director Birdie who said, hey, I think there's something on the CIP we can move back. They went back and checked in terms of some of their equipment and the 15-year cycle, and when would they really have to purchase that again. And it was just kind of irony that Councilmember Ganfield had asked earlier about that as well too, like what's that equipment and what does it entail. So that's one that we felt from a staff perspective. That's not necessarily one that came out of council discussion, but as long as we were talking about the CIP, making amendments, that's something we could see moving back. I think during some of the meetings too, there was some just questions about some things, so we just wanted to clarify a few things. And this maybe it was one person that had them or multiple people, but there is number 56, the River Project. That amount on the CIP right now does include possible funding for an engineering observation contract. I know that's been discussed, but I think there was a question about if the bid price was this much, how come there's more on the CIP? And that's what that's allowing for if we would do some kind of engineering contract. 119 Aldridge School connection, there was just a question whether that included all the connections we had discussed, and it does. 121 Annual Street Repair Program, that's our pavement management program that you hear from engineering every year. It's various streets throughout town. And I think there was just a question whether something like Main Street, is that kind of double, I mean, is it in that line item and also on the Main Street line item? So we just wanted to clarify that, you know, again, 121 is truly just those pavement management, the various streets throughout the community, that the bigger projects where we're using a bigger amount of the local option sales tax is its own specific project. So we may get $6.5 million of local option sales tax a year, and you'll see in 121 there's only $4 million programmed, and the extra is what we're using for things like Main Street, or in the past maybe it's Cedar Heights, University Avenue, whatever that is. So 121 truly is, it's, you know, a separate project than the rest of those. I think there was some concern on 135 that Union Road was taken off and put it on the unfunded list. We did talk about, I don't know that we really moved it to unfunded. It was more like we delayed it until FY29, and since the CIP cuts off at FY28, it goes on the list, but the detail sheets did talk about how it's just being delayed to FY29, and then again, that had related to the bridge on Main Street. Now, you will on 135 still see some funding in there, though, as it relates to the sewer and stormwater piece of that project. So that's some clarification. So I think the thought is maybe going back and taking them one by one, chairperson, to do that. And so we've outlined what we thought we heard, but again, obviously council can make whatever motions they want. We just tried to kind of outline what those may be.
All right, thank you, Director Rodenbeck. All right, so yeah, the game plan tonight is going to be to tackle one item at a time. I thought that'd be a pretty direct way to move about. You can see that the motions are listed with each item. So number one is item number 35, change or the downtown parking ramp study. So I guess the discussion, who wants to start this discussion off?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, Councilwoman DeBur.
Okay, I'll start it. Just in the description that we have here from the slide, it left off the word need. Is that going to be part of the study, is whether we need one or not? Or is it just location and design?
I think we can absolutely include that. You know, I think for us, from a staff perspective, we know once we get some direction is, obviously our next step would be figuring out an RFP. What's the scope of the RFP? Is it better to do a grand scope with a lot of things? Is it better to do one piece first, like a need, and then move on to another study? I think that's all things we can talk about and get some direction on that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Chairwoman, I guess on that one, I think we do need to determine the need before we go ahead on with item 36 that's in there, but we'll address 35 as is. I guess in the interest of expedience, I would make a motion that we move the fiscal year 23 funding into fiscal year 24 so that we can accomplish that assessment before we undertake budgeting for a $20 million parking study. So I move that we move funding from fiscal year 23 and carry it over to 24 for line item 35.
Okay, there's the motion. Is there a
Second.
second? All right, there's a second. Any further discussion from council? And we will have time for each item for public comment, is how we'll go about it tonight. Any further council discussion? I just want to say one thing on this, because obviously downtown parking is, I was elected in August of 2020. We've talked about downtown parking that whole time over and over and over and over and over again. It's been a topic of discussion in Cedar Falls since I've been an adult and moved here in 1996. I'm sure it'll be talked about long after I'm dead and gone. My thought on, because I was a person who voted to, I guess, approve this referral at the time, was a willingness to have the discussion that so many people seem to want to have. So I'm okay with pushing it down the line. I think I've said publicly many, many, many times that I do not feel there is a parking problem in Cedar Falls, downtown Cedar Falls. So I just want that to be known, because I feel like it's good to step back and remember how we got here. And to me, that's how we summarized, in my mind, how we got here. Yes, Councilwoman DeBur.
Jen, this was budgeted for 2023, and that would end in June, and this isn't going to be done before June anyway. So it
Correct.
just makes sense to move it to the next year, because it's
Correct.
not going to be done in the next 4 months.
Sure, absolutely.
Yep.
Councilman Schultz?
So just for my 2 cents, this, for me, isn't just the parking. I think it's an overall vision of where downtown is going. And if it's going to incorporate, and I guess, this will tell us if there's a need, but is there the private, public partnership that brings in more businesses, brings in, where else are we gonna grow our businesses? It's not just, hey, I can't park and go to Tony's. Usually in front of the city hall is a great place to park, right? But it's more on what's the vision, not just parking spots, but what's the vision for all of downtown?
Okay, any further comments from council? All right, is there any comments from the public? Okay, I will take that as that no comments from the public. Any further comments from council? All right, so I think we're just doing kind of a voice vote here to get consensus as to whether or not this motion carries on. So the motion on the floor, just to remind everybody, but obviously it's in front of you, is move the $100,000 funding from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay? All right, so consensus is there to make that change. Item number 2, change number 36, the downtown parking structure. So that kind of ties in, obviously, with the last one. Council discussion on this one. Any further council discussion? Yes, Councilwoman DeBur.
This is based off of future TIF dollars, correct? Not TIF money that's in a savings account.
Correct. We don't have any TIF money sitting in a savings account, so we always have the expenditures, we certify the debt, and then as TIF's collected, then we repay ourselves.
So this could be taken off of this line item, and it wouldn't make any difference, except that it seems like it shouldn't even be on here until we do the study. But does it going to affect any kind of a
No.
loan or anything? Because
Nope.
obviously you have to get the money before you build it.
Right. Nope, I don't think it would affect anything. Again, I think for staff, we understand, if we're doing a study, we're gonna know more after a study's done. So whether that's next year's CIP that we're talking about it again based on that study, hey, do we wanna put it back on? And that's what I was saying earlier. We heard a little bit of mixed feelings on this item. We heard a little bit, just take it off. We heard, no, can we leave it on, but just push it back? But I think from a staff, again, we understand the study, we will know more after study.
Well, what would the $2.5 million that's budgeted for this year, what would that be used for?
So,
No, it's for this year, it's for 24, well, the
Sure.
budget for next year.
but, I think for us, if we wouldn't have expended anything, we just wouldn't have certified any debt in the downtown. We wouldn't have had to do that. So it's not like we have it there, that pot of money, so to speak. Other things, it's the actual pot of money
Right.
we have. Where in
Right,
this
is
case,
future.
yeah, we have to expend it before we certify it, and then we get the revenue. So by not doing it, pushing it back, no concerns.
Okay, yes.
Sure.
Councilman
Chairman.
Harding.
I think the sentiment for this one was just to have it on there to show that we're interested in it and that we're looking into what the future, like what, to Councilmember Schultz's point, that we're as a council, we have it there as a placeholder, whether it's a private-public partnership, whether the city uses some money, it's just on there to show that it's something we're looking at and that we're thinking about the future vision of downtown. I'm not necessarily opposed to taking it off if that makes people more comfortable with the CIP, but I think that was the intent due to the fact that it really doesn't affect anything either way if we have it on there or we don't. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that was kind of the intent I got from it.
It does affect future projects, though, because if you're going to put the money toward this, you can't do it toward other projects, correct?
Correct. We only have so much increment in the downtown.
If we use it, yeah. I
we use
guess
it.
what I mean is I'm just talking about having it on there. If we have it on there and we push it down, 2 years fiscally down the road, it's not something they need to make the budget, I guess is what I mean. So it's up to you guys. If you want to take it off, I'm comfortable taking it off. If you want to push it to a different year, I'm completely comfortable pushing it to a different year. I think, like I said, it's just to show that we're looking at it. But I do agree, we need to study to see the need, figure out first what we're going to do.
Councilman Ganfield?
I think I just wanted to echo some of your sentiments. I heard previous council members even say, hey, parking has been an issue since as long as I've been on council. And I thought it laughable at the time, but now having served for several months, I see that there's some argument back and forth. I guess my contention with allocating 20 million, whether it's actually expended or just earmarked, is that we don't know for sure what we're needing. I think what I heard from goal setting was we want to look into it and figure out what it's going to look like. And that includes what a paid parking system revisited looks like and things of that nature. I guess I would be in favor of removing it for the optics of, I know we're not expending it, but even in the public's eye, a $96 million budget for this year, including $2.5 million in unexpended funds, it may be hard to understand. So I guess I'd be in favor of removing that line item until such time as we figure out exactly how it's going to come back. So I don't want to stifle any other discussion before we make a motion, so.
I
I'll
just
yield
want
for
to,
now.
I just need some clarification from Jen. That is included in the entire total, right? It's not TIF is a separate line, so the total would still, for everything, would be 459.
Well, I
Or
think
how
what,
does-
I think what I'm hearing is if there's a motion to remove it, it actually would just totally get removed. Or maybe we might move it to the unfunded list, just to kind of show like, hey, it was talked about, but it wasn't funded. I mean, kind of that, like you mentioned about earmarking versus funded. We could sure put it on the unfunded list if that's kind of a compromise, that it's there, but it's not funded on the CIP, and it would get subtracted from the total,
Okay.
that, if we took it off.
Yep.
Anyone else have any comments on council before I turn it over to public comment?
Point of order, real quick.
Yes.
Since we're not actually discussing a motion yet, do you want to entertain a motion before we take comment, or is that out?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Is there,
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Just for my own knowledge. So if we have something in the TIF like this in the future, would that actually go into the budget itself? Or would it just be on the CIP to certify if we decided to use it? My thought is that it wouldn't actually be a part of the budget. It would just be on the CIP. And then if we decide to use it, we would certify that debt and go down that road. But I could be wrong. So I'm curious.
Sure.
Yeah, that's kind of more where I was.
Okay. So if this was not changed, if this just stayed as is today, and there
Yes.
was 2.5 million in FY '24, you would see it included in the budget under the TIF bond fund. Doesn't affect the general fund, doesn't affect GO funding, in terms of property taxes. But why we do that is, if we would expend funds, we want to make sure we budgeted for that. But if we would do nothing with it, like if we left it, it was in the budget, and we didn't do anything, we wouldn't be certifying the debt, we wouldn't have the debt. There's no, how do I want to say it? It's not like the general fund where if we have extra, we can save it. There just wouldn't have anything that happened with this. But we would budget for it to comply under stated code that if we expended, we budgeted.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So, and that's for FY '24?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the only year? So-
Right.
So if we were looking at this in FY '25, '26, would not be in the
Right.
budget this year?
Right, correct. Only the FY '24. That's what I was saying. If it stayed as is, where it was in the FY '24 count. To me, this one is kind of a perfect example of when we talk about the CIB in a planning document, this is kind of that perfect example of, if we don't have any intent to spend funds this next year, we don't have to budget for it. But like you said, is it good to kind of plan ahead that, yeah, maybe, or when we're talking about downtown TIF, it's kind of in there about, okay, what other projects do we have, like Councilperson DeBoer mentioned, and do we need to factor in then, hey, and out there in 5 years, we might do a parking ramp, so we have to kind of think about that too. So to me, this is kind of that example, but again, that doesn't mean we have to have it on there this year. We can talk about it again next year when a study's done and have clearer data.
If we moved it to unfunded and just kind of to have it on there as a possibility for the future, that would just be on the document and that wouldn't go into the budget at all. It wouldn't show up as a possible TIF dollars or anything. It would just
Correct.
be on the planning document, but no source of funding, correct?
Correct, but when it's on the planning document, it's not this one.
Yeah.
It's the other
on the
list in
other
your book
list.
that
Yeah,
shows
exactly.
the unfunded. Yep.
Okay. Well, I would make a motion to move it off of this and just put it on unfunded, just to show that it's there for a possibility of
I'd
future.
second that.
Okay, motion and second. Any further discussion before I turn it over to public comment? All right, would anyone from the public like to speak on this topic?
Jim Brown on behalf of the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation, 200 State Street here in Cedar Falls. Covering a few things, and if it's okay, Chair, I might go back to the last item since they're kind of related to
sure.
the parking ramp. We really appreciate at least the fact that there's funding for the feasibility study. As it's been mentioned a few times, in the world of development, folks just want certainty. So then that plan can be arranged towards ultimately having development. Some great points have been made in terms of the parking ramp itself. The irony in my mind is that, and some other things have been brought up by other council people, is a parking ramp that we've shown, I think, offline to a few of you the ideas that have been out there for a number of years, potential costs of the projects and stuff like that. But again, the irony is the parking ramp would indeed be a solution to the very delay we've had downtown for the last year in relation to parking. It is a sign of growth. It's a sign of being, what I'll say, proactive instead of reactive, especially with the river improvement project coming. So one question I do have maybe for the director is, if we're not putting we're putting it offside to the non-funded part of the budget, because if it's implemented, it'll be paid through with financing with the TIF. But does that include potentially in the years to come if we hit that, if we do need GO dollars? In other words, we do need tax dollars up to that $700,000 threshold. So should that be in there, just in relation to if we happen to go over, or if it's planned according to a year or 2 or 3 from now, if we need that? I would also urge, again, I think this is part of, or maybe indicative of some things over the last year, is leaving it in there as a plan. It's in the mind. It's just like from 2016, we had the 2025 plan from the late John Cruz, who we carried through a lot of those different projects and programs. And I think if you ask the general public, they would have thought, well, I never knew that was in there. But for some folks, either on council staff or in other positions that have been a part of that planning process, it's in writing as a plan. And I think that makes a big difference, especially as the elected will come and go. Thought process have been put into it, planning process have been put into that. I think, again, so we're not talking about something a few years from now that was never talked about. If it's in there each and every year, it's a plan to move forward accordingly. I would like to ask that question as far as that threshold. I might be way off, but budgeting for it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get you an answer here. Anyone else have any comments from the public?
Kim Bear on behalf of Community Main Street, 310 East 4th Street. I don't feel like I can sit there and not say anything, certainly, since I never thought I would spend the majority of my adult life talking about parking and public restrooms. So to me, I really feel like pushing the feasibility study. I get that it's not going to be spent this year, but why not push that another year for keeping that in the CIP, the parking ramp? I feel like the things that are on the screen tonight are the dome, great project, the pool, great project. You know what those things bring is tourism. You know where those people go? Downtown. And we need someplace for them to park. And that's when it's going to be busy, and that's when we're going to hear the aches and pains of the growth of our amazing downtown. So I would encourage you, instead of removing it and putting it on the unfunded, because I do think personally that makes it look bad. I can't think of a more fancy word, so we'll go with that. I think you leaving it on there and maybe pushing the entire timeline back, that whole, everything goes back one more year, I think that makes it look like you are still, looking at the vision of downtown, like Gil mentioned, and I feel like Simon did as well. Like, we are looking at the vision of downtown and what that development looks like moving forward, and it's also being supportive of the businesses and the property owners that are within the district right now. There is a lot of development that has happened over the last 35 years since Community Main Street has been there, certainly, and I would hate to see that stifled or drawn back because they're not seeing the support of the council, the CIP, the budget, all of those things mixed together. We want this community to grow and to see that vision, and that includes the tourism aspect, and unfortunately that includes parking.
All right, thank you. Anyone else from the public have any comments?
Good evening, Rosemary Beach, 5018 Sage Road, Cedar Falls. I'm so interested in the fact that the bathrooms got mentioned before I got here. And why I'm so pleased with that is that it does make a difference with what's going on in Cedar Falls. I just wanted to read a couple of these things in the newspaper. The quality of life projects to smaller initiatives, improvements and studies for fiscal years 2023 through 2028. And I thought, well, I think a bathroom's a smaller thing. Maybe you could find $5,000, $10,000 if you aren't going to be too poor, that you could possibly do bathrooms. We could go good with that. Okay, let's see, 212 projects totaling $460 million. Well, I don't know that the bathroom is in there anywhere, but I'm mentioning that again. And I know people keep saying parking ramp. Well, you can see how the parking ramp is doing. And in between, we still need a bathroom, is my opinion. And so they must identify location for a parking ramp. If anybody had asked me 3 years ago, I would have said, torn this building down and put a parking ramp right here. That's where I would have put it. This building could have gone outside where the city building is. Anywhere else in town, we could have built another one of these. But we still could have put one on this lot, I think, and I have no idea money-wise. Anyhow, I'm up here to say I think we need if we don't get a parking lot, we could put a potty house out there somewhere. Have you considered it, and I haven't asked Community Main Street, but of enlarging that around the area somewhere and adding some nice restrooms? I still think we are too big and too great not to have that kind of facility in Cedar Falls for our visitors when you're asking them to come here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beach. Anyone else from the public wish to make a comment about item number 2, the moving the funding for the downtown parking ramp? And I guess the motion actually is to remove it to the unfunded at this point. Is that your motion, right?
Keep it on there, but move it. to
Yes,
the
yes.
unfunded for now.
Anyone else have any comments? Okay, before I make a comment, because I have a comment, did you have an answer for Mr. Brown about his question?
Gotcha.
Okay.
If I make sure I understand it correctly, I think he was asking about some GO funding, 700,000. And so, first of all, yes, that would be the cap, is a GO on a parking ramp. I think what he was asking about is, do we need to plan for that, budget for that, if we were going to use GO? And of course, absolutely, we would want to do that in terms of, that's again, kind of the whole point of the CIP. We like to kind of get an idea where our GO funding's at, so we know, are we kind of balancing that out every other year? Now, in saying all that, again, I think we know if we do a study, we're probably gonna know a lot more after the study's done. And we can sure come back here in a year from now and talk about that as well, and that might change GO funding. I mean, if you pull out last year's CIP, the GO funding's not exactly the same that's on this one. Again, it's a planning, it changes. We know things like Aldridge School Connections changed the GO funding for this year. So it does change. If we need to talk about GO and a parking structure next time around, we can sure do that. So I'm hoping I answered his question.
Is that,
Maybe I answered.
okay, okay. Okay, well, if it's okay, I'd like to make a comment. So as a person who, again, doesn't feel there's a parking problem in downtown Cedar Falls, and as a person who's sat on this council and we talk about compromise a lot, and as a person who, like you all, has sat here with lots of people giving their 2 cents on concerns about parking and shared parking and all the things we've talked about in the last couple years regarding downtown and the downtown zoning. I do not feel that we should, I'm okay with kicking the can down the road, but I do not feel that we should move it because as Director Bear said, it just, I mean, we've spent so much time and energy and staff's energy and kind of had, I guess what I want from this when I said yes to this referral was the discussion about what could be. Like, yeah, maybe I might not get on board, but I need to learn what would the cost be? What are the possibilities? Things like that. So kicking it to the unfunded does feel like it kind of gets put to the back burner where we might forget about it. Where if we kick it down the road, as was mentioned in the packet to fiscal year 25 and 26, obviously we know as a council we can keep kicking it down the road because this is a planning document. And who knows what the council will look like next year. But I don't feel that removing it to the unfunded is a good thing. And that's coming from a person who isn't totally on board with it yet. But I just, for all the time and energy of our citizens and our staff and ourselves, I don't feel like pushing it to unfunded is the right move. Yes, Councilman Harding.
I can see that side. I think as far as funding goes, I guess it would be maybe helpful if we decided that after the feasibility study, we would then, of course, hit it at goal setting to see if how that study would tell us, well, besides the need, potential costs and different, I would hope that it would tell us like different costs. Also, we're putting it in the CIP. I mean, there could be private-public partnership on this, which would then mean that we might not have to use as much TIF dollars. I do understand that it's a placeholder and it's good, and I can totally see that side, but I do also want to recognize that we're here to try to get a CIP passed and get as many people on board with this as possible. So I guess saying that, I definitely want to have the feasibility study like in 35 that we talked about, and I could go either way with having it on the unfunded or having it in here. I don't want to take it off completely, so I don't want to do that.
Yes, Councilman Schultz.
So to Chairman Dunn's point, I'm concerned about losing focus of it. And Simon, I think when he asked Jen that question, if we go to unfunded, are we losing sight of it? And, the answer was no, but it is a concern. So I'd be opposed to moving it also. I want to, it essentially doesn't affect what we spend unless we spend it, right? So keeping it on here, I think, is keeps us focused.
Yes, Councilwoman DeBerg.
Well, Union Road was moved to the unfunded, and that seemed to be okay. And so moving this to the unfunded, each year we do the CIP, after we've done the feasibility study, if it's decided that it is a need, and then you can always put it on next year or the year after's CIP. It doesn't need to be on this one, because it could be like Union Road, where it's put on the unmet needs. So over my time on the council, I've seen many things put on unmet needs, and as timing is right and money is right, they've moved on to the CIP. Just premature to put it on before we even know if we're going to do it.
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
I think I would share the sentiments. I appreciate the perspective of folks that are in the positions of doing the work and observing this. I think we can pivot pretty quickly with the CIP, as we've seen on a couple of the items that will come up to discuss next. So I think moving it to the unfunded list is a safe bet until we figure out how much we need for it. To me, I'm a little bit concerned about publishing the amount that we expect to spend. It's like going into a car dealership and saying, hey, my budget is $4 million. Show me your $10,000 cars. They're never going to do that. They'll only show you the most expensive options. So I think we need that feasibility study first. And we will be able to pivot pretty quickly, I think, next year, as we've demonstrated by a couple projects that were not even known until this year and are now on the CIP. So for that reason, I'm comfortable with it, even though the optics might be a little bit abrasive to some. I think we can bring it back up once we figure out what we're doing.
All right, thank you. Any other council comments on this motion? Okay, so the motion is to remove the funding for the project for the downtown parking ramp to the unfunded list, correct? Okay, so we'll do a voice vote for consensus. So all in favor for that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay. Okay, so there was consensus for that one. So item number 3 is number 53, the Unidome renovation. Council discussion on this item.
Chairperson, then?
Yes, Council.
I think
Person.
at the risk of sounding a little bit tight on it, I guess I would rather that we didn't fund it as much, but come some, so that we can share the cost. I'm not prepared to vote for a budget that increases taxes on our citizens, and as I understand it, that might be a pipe dream. So I don't want to add a ton there. Where there's some general obligation bonds on another item, I'd like to shuffle a little bit even more. So I guess part of me, given that they're two different taxing entities, I want to partner for this project. I see the ROI, but I'd like to reduce that contribution because everybody's tightening their purse strings this year. I did discuss this with our directors as well, that I'd like to start at maybe even reducing this down to $1 million as a landmark contribution from the city, so that there is some partnership there. They do have some work to do to overcome that difference. I know I'm probably not going to get there. I'd almost like to take 2 and 3, or 3 and 4 together and make a recommendation, but I'll let others speak first.
Yes, Councilman Harding.
Again, tonight for me is just get as many people on board as possible. You know, there's a lot of things in the CIP, and as it is a planning document, we all as council members want to see it different ways. I want to see the $3 million in there for you and I think that it's a worthwhile project. But if I understand moving the $500,000 from the Economic Development Fund over to the pool would get us down to $200,000 on the GO on the pool, and so therefore raising taxes significantly less. So while it's not my preference, if the majority of the body can get behind this, then I would be open to changing it to 2.5 only. I don't want to go any lower than that. And it hurts me to want to go lower, but I can, again, we have to get a CIP and a budget approved. So if we're willing to all get behind it, I'm willing to move a little.
Thank you. Councilman Schultz.
So I'd like to see us fund the entire $3 million, but I'm fine with doing the concession of moving to the 2.5 to get it done, because, you know, UNI brings in students globally, right? And it certainly is a great place for, it's up there, and hopefully they do well. We need to encourage everyone to support UNI, and that support's got to start with us. I know the mayor was there, I know Jen was there yesterday, packing the dome, right? Well, if we don't have the dome, you're gonna, what, pack the parking lot, right? It has to be there, it has to be a part of our ongoing support of this community.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilwoman DeBoer?
I'd be interested to know more about the 2080 agreements that we would come up with. What kind of benefits would the public get going forward through the 2080 agreement? Would it be things like, I don't know, use of the dome to walk in the morning or something? Or do we have an idea what some of that would be?
So my understanding, just from talking with the athletic department, is there are some of those things that are in place now that are maybe not formalized, and that's exactly what maybe the 2080 agreement moving forward would formalize, is some of those opportunities.
Chairwoman? So
Yes, Councilman
just for
Gabriel.
clarity, then obviously this CIP is the planning document. We'll be able to vote again on going forward with this contribution once we see what that 2080 agreement entails. So we're not committing and expending the funds until we know what we're getting back in exchange. Correct?
That's correct.
Perfect.
Council Chair.
Yes, Councilman Harding.
I can understand, we're putting forth $2.5 million possibly towards an entity to show our support, and we want to see something back. But I would not want us to forget that one thing we see back is the fact that thousands and thousands of people come from all over to the Dome and spend their money here and stay here. So our return, our ROI, or return on our investment is not just through the 28E agreement. It's the fact that we benefit $17 million a year plus in our area. Local businesses benefit, which means we get local option sales tax from that, which means our hotels benefit, which means that we thrive as a community. So I'm not saying that we don't need 2080 and we don't need to look into that. I agree that we do, but I just don't want us to lose sight that the economic impact is a huge benefit, and that is only going to continue to grow, especially as we make the Dome more viable for bigger and better events. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. I guess before we move forward I don't think we have a motion. So what is the motion anyone wants to bring forward on this?
Chairwoman?
Yes?
Yes, I'd be so bold as to ask if we could look at, and this is a starting point in my mind, but to look at combining changes 53 and 70 in this way. Let me explain it before the motion. That we would remove only $1 million in funding from the Dome. That would bring it down to $2 million, different from the proposed slide. So that would come out of economic development funding. So if we removed that, that would be a compromise. We're still funding to the tune of $2 million instead of $3 million. Of that $1 million that's saved, take half of that out of the budget and usage entirely. Moving on to item 70, give that $500,000 of economic development funds as proposed, but reduce their funding by $200,000, bringing the general obligation fund completely out of the pool. That still gives them $2.6 million in funding, or I'm sorry, $2.9 million in funding. It would remove $200,000 in funding from the pool. So pulling the purse strings a little bit on both projects, but still giving something. And if we can't get there after that, I'd be shocked. I know that may seem a little bit of a harsh reality, but that would be my motion, is to reduce the UNI funding to $2 million and the high school pool by $200,000, removing the GO in total.
Okay, I'd like to stick with just
that
one item at a time.
Okay, so
Because
the
I
first
also want to
motion-
make sure the public has so
Yep.
we'll stick with the item number 3.
So item number 3, I would make a motion to reduce the economic development fund contributions to contribute $2 million to the pool, or to the Dome, excuse me.
So you want to reduce it by $1
Another
million.
$500,000, yes. From the slide, it would be another $500,000
So total of, the motion is to reduce the total funding
by
by
$1
$1 million.
Correct.
Okay,
And does that motion also include the 2080 agreement portion?
Yes.
Then I'd second that.
okay. Motion and second. So at this time, since we've already had some discussion, we'll go ahead and turn this over to the public. Anyone for public comment on this item, which is item number 53, the Unidome renovation.
Thank you. Mark Nook, President of the University of Northern Iowa. I want to address a few of the things that have been discussed tonight, but also in the past, just kind of put a frame around this, and I think some others will fill in some of the blanks, but for 47 years, the Unidome has been here in our community. During that time, we've hosted concerts, The Who, the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys. Gee, I guess I may have just dated myself a little bit there, but those are the ones I remember. We've also hosted outdoor sports shows, boat shows. A recent magazine that I picked up said the #1 sports show in Iowa is the Iowa Boat and Outdoor Show in the Unidome. The 3rd best sports show is the one we host in March. The Iowa Boats and RV Show starts 10 days from today and runs for 3 days and brings countless people to our community. The Unidome also hosts AAU athletic events, bringing thousands of school kids to this community to play volleyball, to wrestle, to engage in other AAU competitions, bringing their families, bringing their friends, bringing their communities. As all of you know, we also host the Iowa High School State Championships, football championships, bringing people from around our state into our community, into what is, I would argue, one of the most recognized buildings in the entire state, perhaps only second to the Golden Dome in Des Moines. And I can tell you it's a lot more fun to be in the Unidome than the Golden Dome. We also host UNI Athletics, bringing countless thousands of people to this city every single year to see football games. And quite frankly, we wouldn't be a Division I athletic program if the Dome had never been built. It was the catalyst to push us into Division I athletics. All of these bring people to our community, thousands of people to our community. As we've said, it's been pointed out, $17 million worth of economic development annually. And that's been going on for 47 years. These people come to our community. Some of them eat at a restaurant and leave. Some of them eat at a restaurant and buy something at Shields and get on the road. Some spend 3 or 4 days here in our hotels, in our restaurants, shopping at stores in downtown, shopping out in the Viking Plaza and along University Avenue. Without the Dome, many of those would not be happening. Would we have 2 Holiday Inns setting at the end of Hudson and Highway 20 without the Unidome? Because there is a constant need for people to have access to good hotels, because they're coming here for events at the Dome and at McLeod. Those sorts of hotels get built and built in our community. That is something that has been going on for 47 years. It has been the Dome has been a significant economic driver for our community, as you can see. It's been going on for 47 years. All of the money that was used to build that Dome were private dollars. If it hadn't been for the vision of Stan Sheriff and the activities of T. Wayne Davis, the Dome would not have been built with the private funds from so many in our community. This has really been a gift, not just to the University of Northern Iowa, but to Cedar Falls and the entire valley. And now the building is 47 years old, and it needs a little help. This is, for us, what we call an auxiliary building. We really aren't a taxing authority. Yes, we are a state agency, but we can't levy taxes as a university. We can't go and do a bond initiative. We have to raise these dollars privately, all of these dollars privately. So we're asking you to join us, and join, more importantly, our donors in a vision of our future, to keep the activity, the economic activity that has been happening in this building for 47 years, going for 50 more years after this point. It's an important project. To the University of Northern Iowa, no doubt. To the city of Cedar Falls, really beyond question. Do you want to keep that kind of economic development coming to this city? Can we go without doing this sort of renovation? Perhaps. But the Dome already looks a little tired. And it will continue to be even harder for us to attract that boat show, to attract that AAU competition, to keep the Iowa High School football championships if the Dome isn't a first-rate place to come and see and to visit. And we don't build an economic community around that Dome that supports them with quality hotels, quality restaurants, quality places to shop. So I'm asking you to think critically about our community and look at the future of this community and help us support the Unidome. it's important to the citizens of this community. So we're asking you, really the citizens of Cedar Falls, through you as their elected officials, to help us keep that a high-quality economic engine for this community and keep the community driving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, President Nook. Anyone else from the public wish to comment?
Good afternoon. David Harris, serve as Director of Athletics at UNI. I'd begin by just thanking the council because as these deliberations are occurring and you're considering the commitment, the investment in the dome, that is so significant for us. For all the reasons that President Nook mentioned, we're working to try to enhance a facility that we believe will benefit the entire community, and it's been shown for 47 years. As we've gone out and begun to do the fundraising for this beloved facility, it's clear that even from the very beginning, as the vision was being cast, it was thought of equally as being a facility that would benefit the community as one that would benefit the athletics department or the greater university. And it has functioned in that way since that time period, being a true multi-purpose facility. All of the events that President Nook mentioned and more occur in this facility. And I can just say from personal experience as someone who's not from the area, I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but I've been in the Midwest for about 21 years, working at the University of Wisconsin and then Iowa State before coming to UNI. And I can say that from the beginning, as I heard about the Unidome, I always heard about it as a multi-purpose facility. Always heard about it as a facility that would bring concerts and shows and so many things that didn't have anything to do with athletics, didn't have anything necessarily to do with the university, to the community. And as I came to UNI and understood the true impact of that, and it's been mentioned earlier, $17 million annually, 500,000 visitors on an annual basis, having a chance to see it as an outsider and as an insider really gives you a sense of just the significant impact that this facility has. And so we want to make the investment, put the time, the energy, the effort into truly modernizing this facility for this community. President Nook mentioned that the dome is tired, and as someone who works in this area and sees the dome every day and sees facilities when we go to other campuses and to look at what's being invested in those places, we certainly have fallen behind. We were in a position, I think, when the dome was built that we were certainly ahead, and we've been ahead for a number of years. But now we're in a position where the types of amenities that the members of our community ask for and really demand before they're going to make the investment in coming to the events in the dome, we don't have. We don't have some of the basic things that are needed to be able to continue to function at a level that will continue to bring the people to the community that we know that we all value and treasure. And so when you look at the difference between $3 million and 2.5 or 2 million, that is certainly significant for us. That's very significant. $1 million is not easy to raise, and I can say that from firsthand experience. So for anything that is not included as a part of this investment, that's going to be something that's challenging for us, and we're certainly up to the challenge, but it's a challenge to go out and raise the money in an environment where we're doing this all with private funding. And so every dollar counts, and I think it was mentioned earlier that the example that this council can set with the level of investment that will resonate with so many people, because we have already gotten questions about what the city will do as far as an investment in the dome as people are trying to make their own decisions about what they're going to do and what level of investment they want to make. They understand that the city is in a position to benefit greatly from this project, and they're kind of watching to see kind of the decisions that are being made as they're looking at trying to make an investment as a family. So here's an opportunity to be able to send a message loud and clear that we are about investing in this community in a way that will help it to continue to grow, help it to continue to bring in people that will have a great time, that will have a great experience, and will talk to friends, neighbors, family members about the importance of this community and just the great time that they had when they decided to be a visitor here to Cedar Falls. And so I appreciate your recognition of all of these things and encourage you to consider the full $3 million investment. For us, every dollar counts. Every dollar is important to trying to give this community the true multi-purpose facility that it deserves. In order to do that, it's going to take some significant work, significant investment, but this is something we can do and will do. And we appreciate having you as partners in this process and ask you to make the investment that allows us to give everyone the facility that this community deserves. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this item, which is the change to number 53, the Unidome renovation? Okay.
Chairperson, I just didn't want to forget that at the seat, everyone's seat, there was a written communication that came in that should have been there. I just didn't want to forget to mention that.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back for council. I do have a comment I'd like to make, if that's okay. So a few things. I think President Nook hit on the $17 million that is circulated throughout our community. That's annually? Is that $17 million, and I hate to yell at you from across the room, but is that $17 million just the visitors, or is that including, like, however you would figure out what the students, like, you know, because obviously I think of myself, like, my first exposure to, besides coming to visit family in Cedar Falls, but my first exposure to Cedar Falls, you know, as a kind of a little young adult, was because I came to the Unidome for high school football games, and then I came for UNI football games, and then because I like to have a lot of fun, I fell in love with this community, and here I am 20 some years later living and working and playing in this community. So is that just like the visitors, or is that part of this, what the students somehow are?
The 17 million comes from an economic development study.
Okay.
So it isn't the, one thing I want to emphasize, it's not the revenue that we collect in a year.
No.
Right? It is the dollars that come into the community that are spent on hotel rooms, that are spent on restaurants, that are spent in shopping, right? And how those dollars move around our community.
Sure.
So it is a true impact on the community.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, so that, you know, money is circulating in our community. And then also, I know I say it all the time, but we don't have enough people to work in our community. So as much as we can get exposure to bring people to our community, especially as young folks, I mean, I think that's also needs to be thought of as an investment and in return on our investment, because if we don't have people to work in the facilities that we have, we're not making money and turning the dime there. Councilman Harding.
Just real quick, I think $2 million's too low right now, especially because we're just putting it in the CIP. It's intent. I know we can change those numbers and everything, but it's tough. I already said I'd like to stay at 3 million, but I realize that a lot of members on council want to change it, so I'm willing to compromise in good faith and go to 2.5, but I can't support 2.
Yes, Councilman Schultz.
That's where I am too. I'd love to stay with 3 million. I can remember, and Mr. Sires and I went to school with Stan, Sheriff's oldest son, and can remember back at that time when you know, the thoughts of this were coming around, and envisioning this building that would be large enough to hold football games in. Just couldn't fathom, and to see that come to fruition was awesome. And over the years, to all those events, President, I went to the Who. I went to yeah. There's some opportunity there for the future for that. And when we look at, and Mrs. Beach was, if you talk about bathrooms, anyone that's went to an event there, especially my wife, I go to the bathroom and I'm out. I'm in the wait, right? So things that need to be addressed with that. So again, I'd like to see the 3 million, but for that to pass, I'd be willing to look at the compromise at the 2.5 so that we get this in. But I'm way against dropping it to 2.
Any further council discussion? Councilman Cruz?
Thank you. I guess this would be to President Nook. I'll give you some exercise today here, right? If you could elaborate a little bit on what you and I would see to offer or allow for 28E, what kind of sharing the track, the field for little kids to play football, climbing wall, the pool, what can we, how much spare time is there?
And that's something
I feel like if you're not comfortable answering that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to say. Right now, I don't know how to answer that one right now. I'm glad Ron has reached out to the athletics department because I think that's where that can be worked out. This is an extremely busy facility, as you can imagine, with not just our sports, but the other things that I've already talked about coming into this facility. We do have other facilities, athletic facilities open already. Swimming pool's open. You can come and get time there. We teach swim lessons, those sorts of things. So there are ways we already have facilities open to people on this in this community. We also have the outdoor rental site, right? So people can rent gear from the University of Northern Iowa. So there's lots of ways that we already partner. But right now, I don't know exactly what some of those things would be. David might have a better idea, but I don't off the top of my head. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I would just add, I don't have the exact number as far as hours, but I would say that despite how busy the facility is already open to the public. And so as someone whose office is in the facility, I can say that on a regular basis, I'm seeing people that are using the track or walking the concourse or using the stairs for exercise. And so absent when we have, practices or competitions or events in which the facility is completely reserved, then it has been open to the public. And even during times when we've had practices, I've noticed members of the public who are in there at the same time. So if you're having a practice on the track, there are people that are up in the stands, using the stands, or they're on the concourse. And so from our standpoint, we certainly have no issue with doing whatever we can to formalize that agreement. We feel like it exists right now in spirit as far as what we see with the public that's using the facility. And so for us, it's certainly no problem to continue down that road and formalize an agreement if that's something that's important to members of the council, because as it stands right now, we consider the facility to be open to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman DeBur.
Well, one of the main reasons to move the 500,000 from the Economic Developmental Fund over to the pool was because the pool was being paid for with GO funds, which then impacts the tax rate. I hadn't thought about whether it was 500,000 or the 700,000 as to what impact that would have. Will you have numbers for us to tell us, originally it was almost a 1.5% tax with these changes, or whether if we took this 500 or if we went up to the 700, so you're kind of splitting the difference between the 2 and the 2.7, as to what that would do for that tax rate that was the 1.47?
Sure. So, just like, one of the things we do is we take the whole thing, the 5 years, we take our bond sales over that, and we take current valuation, current tax rate, and do all that. So there's a lot of assumptions is what I'm saying. And so you're right. When we took this over that 5-year period, it was the 1.47%. If we did the changes that were in these motions that were in the packet, it would go down to about 1.2%. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but you have to remember in here is 12 million of bond sales for, 24, 26, 28. And so when you reduce it by 700,000, that's kind of a small percentage of the 12 million. So even though the 1.4 to 1.2 sounds like a small amount, it is an impact. And again, you have to remember that's over a 5-year. That's 1.2 in total over the 5 years. That's not 1.2 a year, that's a total. So does that help?
So the bond sales are actually for 24 and 25. So we actually really need to take another look at this at 24 and 25 if we want to get that 1.2 down lower. Because that's my
Correct.
goal. I want to get that 1.2 lower.
Correct, because you might have noticed at the very end too, is that I mentioned about, I kind of did some summary of the changes at the back, but I was kind of waiting till all the motions were done. But, I mentioned that in here. Obviously, the GO funding, we can refine again 24, 26, 28. It's a plan. So next year's CIP is going to be more critical in terms of determining that 24 funding. But you're right, we can always fine tune it. Every time we do the CIP, we can fine tune the GO funding.
Well, we have to do everything we can to get that 1.2 down to under a percentage.
Sure, so if it took 700,000, I just want to make sure, got it right. So if it took 700,000 to get from 1.4 to 1.2, I think what you're saying is if you wanted under 1%, you'd have to cut another 700,000. I'm just using general math, just kind of broad math right there in terms of just kind of estimating. If
This
that's
year
what
or
your goal-
next year?
Well, it's really
Or
the
the
whole
next 2
thing.
years?
It's the whole 5 years.
Okay.
It's over that whole time. Now, again, what I was trying to say earlier is, we take that and we're making assumptions. That's current valuations, current tax rate, selling our bonds for 3%, selling our bonds for 10. It's to give us an estimate of what the impact is. Because again, we're trying to keep that GO funding level, from a property tax rate standpoint. So a lot of assumptions, but yeah.
Yeah, the 700 that you referred to, that was just using it from this one, which was the dome, and then also the number 57, which
Yep.
was the Cedar Valley placemaking.
Yep, so that's how I got about 700,000 that we were reducing based on the motions in the packet.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilman Sires.
I have a question for Mr. Gaines. Excuse me. Could this be brought to the citizens for a referendum vote? Because it's hard for me to give away citizens' money as much as I love the Unidome and the UNI. Could this not be on the next city vote?
So I'm going to have to defer to the attorney, but I don't believe so.
I will allow certain mayors to go to referendum. This is not one of them, not a budget
What
item.
do they allow?
Well, there's if change of form of government, things like that, but budget items don't go to the public by way of referendum.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council discussion? Okay, so the motion, I believe, is to remove or reduce the funding by $1 million from 300 million to 200 million. Is that what I understood?
From
Yes, I'm sorry.
3 million to 2 million.
Did I say that wrong? I'm sorry.
You're
I'm
giving
sorry.
away a lot more money.
I'm sorry.
Lit up back there, yeah.
I'm sorry. I need more coffee. Okay. I apologize. From 3 million to 2 million. Okay. So I do echo the sentiments of Councilman Schultz and Councilman Harding in that I can't, I am here for compromise. I can't get on board for that. But there's my 2 cents. Anybody else have 2 cents? Okay, so the motion on the floor for this voice vote is to remove or reduce the funding from $3 million to $2 million for the Unidome renovation. So all in favor?
Aye.
And all opposed, nay.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, so I'll probably need a show of hands. Who are the aye votes? And who are the nay votes? Okay, so that does not move forward. But because we want to make sure, I believe, that we're okay to move forward.
Can I make a motion to switch it from the 2 million to the 2.5 per the document?
Okay, so now there's a motion to switch it to the original.
Second.
Okay. Yes, Councilman Harding.
Just real quick, since hopefully we won't have, to go down. We've talked about it a lot. Not saying we can't talk about it more, but I think 2.5 is a good number right now to leave it. So I would support that. I wish it was 3, but I'm okay with moving the 2.5 to get this going forward and get us all behind the CIP. And so.
I echo that sentiment. Anything else that anybody else wants to throw in before we do, do we need further? I feel like we need to keep moving forward here. So, yes, go ahead. Sure.
Don't know the proper protocol, so I raised my hand like.
Yeah, go for it.
Jim Jermeyer, Vice President for University Advancement, live at 4329 Wild Horse Drive, proud tax-paying citizen. If the council would consider the $3 million, and I will not, it's my big word for the day, I won't be superfluous. David and President Nook covered it well. But just projecting ahead, what I would add to it is to project ahead and think about what a $3 million investment really means. In actual year-to-year dollars, it's $60,000 a year. That's what the city is investing in the Unidome over the next 50 years. You heard 17 million. The 60,000 static. If you want to extrapolate it out that way, the 17 million is elastic. The inflationary factor to that and the impact that that will bring to the Cedar Valley is an incredible value proposition. Not to mention the signal, the vision that that sends to other businesses when they're looking at Cedar Falls and they're considering their own value proposition. I want to go there. That's a forward-moving community. Look at what's happening. So I will leave it at that because I know there's other business to attend to tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so the motion again is to reduce item number 53 on the CIP, the Unidome renovation, from $3 million to $2.5 million. All in favor for that change, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay? Nay. Okay, so maybe, do you have that, Madam Clerk? Okay. All right, so then we'll move down to item number 4, which is change.
So just to verify, Chair, that passed?
Yeah. It passed for the.
Was it
yeah.
5-2, Kim?
5-2.
Is that what you had written down?
Item number 4 on tonight's agenda, which is change number 70 on the CIP, which is the high school pool, and the council discussion on that. And I guess maybe to move things forward, let's just go ahead and, if we need a motion, go ahead and get your motion going. Yes, Councilman Harding.
Having read this and thought about it, we just took the 500,000 there from the EDF funding, or the Economic Development Fund. So I would motion to take that money and put it towards the GO amount of the high school pool, lowering the GO amount to $200,000 for the pool project.
Second.
Okay. And then to clarify, because I believe that's exactly what we have in front of us,
Yep.
right? So it's still the $8 million would go to the pool. It's just a shift in funding. Any council discussion on this item? Yes, Councilman Nibber, or Councilwoman Nibber.
Jen, is there any other funding sources for that remaining 200,000 that's in GO? No.
Just flipping the page. Well, I think we can look at a couple things. You can see on there that there is, our rec CIP, which is money we set aside from all of our, every time someone goes to the rec center, someone goes to the pool, we have an amount that goes towards capital. We could do that. That may impact other rec CIP, though, projects on the CIP. We could talk about whether you want to talk about general fund savings and have it dedicated to this instead, increase that amount. We could do, I'm trying to just kind of brainstorm right now. If you wanted to commit another year of economic development funding and put 200,000 of economic development funding in.
Director Rodenbeck, did we spend, and Mr. Gaines, what did we spend the extra money from the GO last year on? We had 300,000, I believe, left that we were going to talk about at goal setting to go.
Oh.
GFS?
No, we had money. We voted to we had money left. We had spent.
Correct. So you guys passed a resolution on the transfer. You're stumping me on the exact amount, but you're right. The last line item, because we talked about our health insurance fund.
Exactly.
We talked about transferring funds. We took the rec grant, put it in the rec CIP. We took the backfill amount, put it towards our general fund savings, and then you're right, I believe it was,
It was
off the top of
300
my
and
head,
some
it was,
thousand.
I know, I'm looking at Lisa if she remembers. I thought it was 290 or something like that off the top of my head, but,
I guess my question is, we haven't allocated that
Yes.
for anything.
correct,
We
So
could
that could be
allocate
something.
that to this.
that is true.
And that would get us down to 0 GO dollars on that.
Not quite, well, on this item.
On this
Yes.
item.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that's something we wish to work towards, I would be open to allocating that money towards this to get it to 0 GO, and we'd still have a little bit left over to put where we want. Even if we want to throw that at the GO, I'm open to doing that as well.
That's a motion, I'll second it.
So I guess I should say it's an amendment to my current motion on the table to utilize that to get it down to 0 GO dollars.
Okay, so, and we got a motion and a second to the amendment to the direction for staff.
For a point of order, is that okay?
Okay.
As long as council understands what happened right there, we're good.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yep.
When it comes up for vote, as long as you spell it out,
Well, I think what happened was the original motion was to take the 500 from the EDF funding as
Yep.
stated in your packet, and now Councilman Harding just amended to take the leftover GO dollars from last year and shift them towards
Right, earmark it for this project.
Earmarked for
project.
this, which
Correct.
would mean through procedurally, we would have to vote on the amendment to include it.
Okay,
and then
I'm
the
sorry.
whole thing.
I feel like
That's all right.
I'm not quite formal in this process. So, okay, so the amendment is before us. Everybody understand the amendment? All right.
Chairperson Dunn, I don't know
Yes.
when you want to take public comment, if it's on the amendment, or just when you get back to the regular motion, I'll leave that up to you.
Let's do the amendment and then get it into where we're, maybe have some direction, and then we'll do public comment.
No, that's fine,
Okay.
just don't want to forget.
Thank you. So the amendment, as stated, so it's taking the leftover GO funds from last year and reallocating them into this project, so it gets the current GO funding down to zero.
Zero, but I think keeping the 8 million in total still to
Yes,
go
so
to
we're still at 8 million. It's just shifting some bucks around, so it doesn't affect the tax base.
It
or
just
the tax
changes
rate.
the GFS to
It does.
3.6 instead of 3.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
So, all in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay? Okay. Let's shift it over to public comment, because I think we'll have maybe some folks that want to speak. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mike Malero, representing Jump In, 1007 Carriage Lane, Cedar Falls. Appreciate all the hard work that you're doing to prioritize the precious resources of the city and use them appropriately. So I know everybody else in here feels the same way. We respect what you guys are doing. We have two pools, two 6-lane pools that are indoor pools in Cedar Falls. One is in complete disrepair. The other one is on its last leg. We have to have a pool in this community. This project is a fantastic collaboration between the schools, the city, and the community, all three providing input as well as funding. It is a big ask to ask you for $8 million. The school's in a comparable amount. Community has raised 2.7 million so far. So there's, from a lot of people, there's a significant groundswell of support. The new pool would be fantastic. It would put us in line with Dubuque, with Iowa City, with Cedar Rapids, Ames. It would put us not comparable to places like Ottumwa and Charles City. No disrespect to those two communities. But that's not where Cedar Falls is comparable to. But without this pool, we will be. So we need it for the community. We need it. It covers all age ranges of the community. It'll be used more than 100 hours a week, significant usage. The majority of usage will be the community, not the school. It will be located at the school, which is a great location for it because, quite frankly, there isn't room for it at the rec center or downtown or most other places in Cedar Falls, but the new school is a great place for it. You're going to have to pay about 38% of the total cost. Same with the school system, community covering the rest of it. So great project. We can all be proud of it. It can be done fairly quickly, broad use across the entire community. I think it's a very solid, although significant amount. I don't want to make that diminish that 8 million, but we really appreciate your support as a council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other folks want to make public comment on this item? Yes, name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Laura Wilson. I live at 2604 Covey Court. I'm here in support of the natatorium. Both my kids swim. I'm a former swimmer. It's a pool that needs to happen, and there's so many people that get such good use out of it. I know that my daughter's getting ready to take her swim unit at Holmes Junior High, and some of the kids that are in that class have never taken swimming lessons. I've heard that from the physical education teachers, and so I think that water safety is paramount. I think that it's a lifelong skill, and as much water as we have in this community, and the falls, and all the people that swim there and take advantage of that wonderful facility, it's so important. I love UNI. I believe purple and gold, but that pool is really geared towards students at UNI first, and it should be, and it's geared toward the UNI swim team. And so we really need this facility. If we even lose Pete or Holmes, which they are on their last leg, and we could lose one any day, that's really going to throw a lot of chaos in terms of our lifeguard training that's going to happen this spring, in terms of the swimming lessons that are scheduled. And I can tell you that I talk to parents all the time that they're like, I can't get my kids into swimming lessons because they fill so quickly. So the demand is there. So I'm really excited about this facility. It really is going to be a great benefit to our community, and it's definitely going to be something that we can use to draw different people to town to go to our swim meets. I know that our coach Woltz is going to probably talk about the Sizzler this summer. We had over 500 swimmers from 4 states come here and stay for a 4-day meet and spend their money in this town. We can't replicate that in the winter right now because we don't have the facilities, and people don't want to come from Iowa City or Des Moines to swim in Holmes. They want to stay in their nice new facilities in their area. But if we have that in the winter, we can have that success here in town. Same thing with the high school teams. I'm the booster club rep for the men and women, and I know that we would love to host Missouri Valley Conference meets. I know we'd love to host districts, which is the state qualifying meet, and those large meets require an 8-lane pool, facilities that can accommodate the number of teams that want to come in, and the technology to do it appropriately. So I think that there's definitely benefit to water safety in this community, there's benefit to the kids that go to school in this town, and there's definitely benefit to the athletes that take advantage and also promote the staff that work at our pools and facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public wish to make comment on this item? Okay, so we'll bring it back over to council. Yes, Councilwoman DeBur.
Clarification on the motion made. I assume that you also were including the 2080 agreement, which was on the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. The entire page.
Okay.
Yes. Any other comments from council? I just have one thing that I want to say. I'm not going to say anything new, so I'm not going to repeat. I just can't imagine Cedar Falls without an indoor pool, and we can't do it on our own for the costs that we're asking for here. So all the things that were previously said, and I totally agree. Water safety is, when you don't have people who have the life skill of swimming, you put them in danger, you take away adventure from them. You know, the falls had a hard enough time staffing with all the staff, let alone lifeguards this summer. I can't imagine us without this project. So anyone else have anything else to say? Okay, so the item on the table is the motion to take the $500 from the EDF funding from the Unidome. No, we're not. We don't have to do that anymore. Yes,
No,
we
we
do.
are.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, we do. We have to do that. Sorry. Take that from the Unidome funding, and then now with the amendment, we will take the leftover money from last year and apply that to this project, so there will not be GO funding needed to be budgeted. Correct, Director Rodenbeck? Did I summarize that?
Correct.
To your understanding? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, we have consensus on that one. All right, so we'll move down to item number 5.
57.
Keep plugging away.
57.
Okay, keep plugging away. Okay. Change number 57 on the CIP, which is the Cedar Valley Placemaking Project. Council discussion on that. Yes,
Make the
Councilman Harding.
motion.
Make the motion to just do all of number 5 on the slide
Yes,
as written.
Second.
I second, okay, yes. A second from Councilman Ganfield. Any council discussion on this?
Okay.
Any public discussion on this? Okay. Yes, yes.
Jim Brown again from the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation. I just want to take something to a different level because there's been a lot of conversation tonight about the different sorts of funding. And I think most folks don't understand because it is very complicated for the city funding. There's funds that come in from different directions. And when council is describing GO funding, that's when the taxes come into play. And of course, everyone wants to pay close attention to taxes. But it seems like we're coming to a head right now from this last year. I spoke to a previous city administrator, now retired, just for the historical perspective of when this process was started, from goal setting to public hearings to the planning session of now, which we've had 2. And he said he didn't remember ever the budget process getting interrupted at this juncture. So something's amiss. There's a hiccup somewhere, I think, in our system. If for any organization, there's money in and there's money out. And clearly you're concerned about the money going out, which is very worthwhile concern. So what's the solution then? We're capped now because of our budgeting process, but what's the solution? The solution is money coming in. And what that means is that includes a city investing in incentives, in projects. I'll remind the council, they turned down a project in the industrial park that would have generated roughly $50,000 a year on property that had been vacant for 20 years. Going out 10 years, that's $500,000 right there. And if we had one of those projects each year, we would have the increased budget to handle some of these things that we want the community to invest in. It takes partnerships, and clearly it takes planning. Cedar Falls got to where we are because of this process, because of those things mentioned. We have a history of doing this, and I think we can move the needle forward and not have this kind of breakdown in years forward if we kind of keep that thing in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this item? Okay, any further comments from council? Okay, so this motion on the floor is to remove it's for number 5 on our agenda, change number 57, Cedar Valley Placemaking, remove the GO funding in the amount of $191,000 and $510, excuse me, $191,510. And you can see, and that includes the items listed there. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay? Okay, so there's consensus there. We'll move down to item number 6, which is change number 59. The comp plan and zoning code or updates. The motion, actually, I'm not going to make the motion. You can see it in front of you that what was discussed with council members. So council discussion and motion on this item.
I'll just make a motion so we can kind of get into it. I would motion to lower the funding to $75,000 each year from FY 24 through 28, not to move it down to 2025 after. We could talk, or future councils can talk about it at 25. Let's just leave it at 75. That's my motion. And also, the rest of everything
Yes.
to follow, but just minus the lowering the funding to $25,000 each year thereafter.
Okay. Motion, I can second, right? I second that. Council discussion on that motion and second. So instead of what you have in front of you, where everything in front of you on item number 6, but instead of where it says lower the funding to $75,000 for only fiscal year 24 and 25, and then after that, lower it to $25,000 each year thereafter. The motion right now is to just make the lowering to $75,000 each year from fiscal year 24 through fiscal year 28.
I would just say to clarify, or the reason why I say that is, we don't know what we're going to be redoing the comp plan. We don't know what we're going to need in 26, 27, 28. That's further out. It can be adjusted. We do know that the comp plan and zoning updates are vital to our community, And whether it doesn't matter if it's form-based or regular zoning, I'm not even going to that. Just the fact that $25,000 is not enough to do any sort of zoning in the city, even if it's just looking at and redoing regular zoning. We're not going to be able to get a consultant or even a person to write up zoning for that. So I get nervous dropping it to that low. Now, if after 2 years and we've done the comp plan, we see that we can drop it, well, then that's an appropriate time to drop it. But for now, I'm okay lowering it by half because it'd be going down from 150 to compromise, but I'd like to keep it at 75 across the board.
Okay, yes,
Chairwoman.
Councilman Ganfield?
I wanted to ask one point of clarification from probably Attorney Rogers. Internal ordinance drafting is something that we're capable of. If we do have some zoning discrepancies or disparity that we want to correct, we should be able to do that in-house without consultancy in some cases, correct?
We can draft ordinance, sure.
Yep. Okay, so we should be able to accomplish that and not have to go outside. I guess in regards to this year's tax and general revenue, I'd be in favor of reducing it to that funding level. I know there are some TIF monies that are set aside. I'm not going to quibble about the 25 here. I guess I'm in support of lowering it, and then we can reassess as those comp plans are renewed.
Okay, any further council discussion on this item? Yes, Councilman Schultz?
I just have a clarification for Dustin. Are you in favor of taking it to 75? Okay.
Yeah, as moved, yeah.
Yep.
And just to remind us, this is a planning document, so I know we're here to compromise so we can move forward with our budget, but even when it's on the budget, okay. Yes, Councilman Cruz?
So, excuse me. When we had some of our meetings, we were talking about splitting this into 2 line items for clarity. The comprehensive plan could be 1 line item showing the 50,000 in fiscal year 24 and 25. And then the actual zone updates would be another line item with what would be 75. If I'm reading this correct. Or are you saying 75 total to include the comp plan and zoning?
I guess.
Yes,
Director
it
Rosen?
was 25,000 a year. Originally, what this meant was 25,000 a year for zoning changes, but 24 and 25 had an additional 50 in each year for the comp plan. And you're right, there was
So
some.
125.
No,
No.
so there'd be a total of 75 in 24 and 25. 50 of that was for comp plan, 25 for just regular zoning,
And just for point of order, the motion on the table is to lower it
Right.
to 75.
for all years.
For all years. We had it at 150.
Right.
So I'd say let's lower it to 75, keep it there for the 5 years. Now, again, it can be changed in 2 years. We know we're doing the comp plan coming up, so just leave it at 75. I just get nervous lowering it to 25. I know we can do some ordinances in-house and all that, but depending on which direction the council chooses to go with zoning, if we're going to say we don't even follow form-based and we just do the hill and we redo everything, I don't know that we have, and maybe staff can correct me if I'm wrong, that we have, if we're going to redo it and go through all our old ordinances, that we have the staff power to do that in an efficient manner. We may need to have some outside help, and $25,000 doesn't get you far, unfortunately, nowadays. So it's just caution, rather over budget than under budget.
And
Yes.
just
Councilman
Chairwoman,
Ganfield?
yeah, just for point of clarity, then we have College Hill TIF District in this year's budget for 25 grand. So would you be in favor of a friendly amendment of 50,000 in general revenue funding for fiscal year 24 and 75,000 each year thereafter? That still accomplishes the $75,000 in reserve for this.
And
heading.
the only thing I want to just clarify on that is it has to be applicable to the College Hill TIF district then. So I just want to clarify that, like through the comp plan, if we could show, I mean, the reason why that originally was in there because we thought the next vision and ordinance was going to be about College Hill, so that's why we put College Hill funding. So I just want to make sure you understand that.
So the funding source is not as relevant,
Well,
if we're just talking about the dollar amount?
right.
Okay.
I would say let's not go there, yeah, just because of complications.
Easier might be just to remove the College Hill, the TIF funding, and just leave the GR at 75.
Yep.
Councilwoman DeBur?
Well, the city's comp plan, that was the 50,000 for each of those years, so that takes care of that. So then the next 3 years, when you dropped it, well, to 75, as they're saying, instead of the 25 per this document, what would the extra 50,000 be spent on?
We're leaving it well,
It was set at 150, and it was suggested to drop it to 25, and
Yeah.
you're suggesting to keep it at 75, which, so that's 50% of what it's at now. I'm just asking, what would you be spending the money on?
well, we don't know if we'd be spending the money. The point is to have it there just in case as an earmark for possible. We know that with the comp plan, we're going to have this new comp plan, and we also know that we're going to be looking at zoning throughout the city to whether it's redo it, clarify it. So that would be budgeted for use for that. So when we do move on to College Hill, when we do move on to University Avenue, when we do look at other stuff in the city, then that would be there. Now, if in 2 years with the comp plan redone, I think council should visit it every year at goal setting. And in 2 years, if that 75 isn't necessary, change it then. Let's look at changing it to lower then. I just don't know that we can't say whether we would need it or we wouldn't need it. So I guess
I know, the reason I ask is by having it in here, it does affect the GR, which is going to affect the tax rate. So I don't want to overestimate what we're going to need if that's going to affect the tax rate we ask of the people. So that's why I'm asking, do you really need it to be 75, or do you need it to be 25, or does it need to be the 150 to the original?
well, I'll ask staff then. If we lower it to 25, is that too low? Or do we need to stay at 150, or is 75 something that is a compromise that would be workable? Honest opinions.
So it depends on what you are looking for out of zoning updates. If you're just looking for some patchwork on the 25 would probably be good. If you're looking for something more with the overhauls, I think in the downtown area, we probably spent, I don't have the figure in front of me, but somewhere between 150 and 200,000 just by overall redoing that. Just doing the vision portion up on College Hill, I know that we're over 100,000 just because of all the interaction that the consultant had with some of those. So again, some of that's depending on what the council's looking for in zoning updates.
Yes, Councilman Cruz.
So I'm trying to follow along and clarify on the item number 6. It's saying 75,000 each year, fiscal 24-25, and then additional 50,000 for the comp plan. But what?
The motion on the floor, it doesn't really match totally.
Right, that's
your
why I want to
bolded part.
clarify.
Yep. So the bolded part, the bolded part now is the motion, and it is to lower the funding to $75,000 each year from fiscal year 24 through fiscal year 28. And then the other dots that are not bolded underneath match, Councilman Harding included that in his motion.
Councilman
Point
Cruz,
of order.
None of those would be relevant.
Yeah.
Correct.
Change all of them.
And then the
Okay.
College Hill funding was going to be rolled into this as well, is what I believe you said.
We dropped that.
Well, I think it would be best to delete it because, again, originally, it has to apply to the College Hill area. So we could leave it in there, but then we just have to keep in mind that any amendments we're doing for that 25,000 have to be applicable to College Hill. Can't be other amendments we would be doing. That's why I'm just saying, if you're talking about a total of 75, maybe it's just easier for you to just remove that College Hill TIF, or you can leave it in. I mean, I know Councilman Ganfield was suggesting maybe it's 50,000 of GR and 25 in TIF. I was just trying to clarify, then
Okay.
those will only have to be for College Hill, the 25. So you can do that, but you'd have to remember that those ordinance changes could only apply there.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, yes, Councilman
So
Ganfield.
just in the interest of coming to a compromise that allows us to move forward with this CIP, I would make a motion to amend the initial to match the slide, so that we do have that extra 50,000 for the next 2 years to get a comp plan done, and then move it to 25, which we can adjust in the coming years if we see that need. And as we see that need, we can make that adjustment. I believe this one has more likelihood of getting us to a place where we can move forward.
Okay, is there a second on that amendment?
Second.
Okay, so motion second. Let's roll it over to the public comment at this time. Any public comment on this item? So number 6 on the agenda, change number 59 on the comp or the CIP plan, and the motion and amendment right now is to keep it as stated in the packet, which is lower the funding to $75,000 each year for fiscal year 24 and 25, lower the funding to $25,000 each year thereafter. Any public comment on that? Okay, Council.
Technically, I don't believe procedurally we would be able to do that, just because that's completely changing the motion. It's not actually amending the motion. It's it's not adding something. So from a procedural standpoint,
We vote down.
I think we would have to vote it down, or I would have to withdraw. But really quickly, I guess I'm open to withdrawing because you can change it. I just want to say that, you know, if you're going to look at University Avenue, if you are going to continue, or councils in the future are going to continue with visioning, and they're going to continue looking at redoing some zoning stuff to make it more clear for developers, which is something that we hear a lot, that's not going to be nearly enough money so I just think that it'd be wiser to leave it just at 75. It's a good compromise. It's down half of what it was. And so I'm still there, but we can vote on it and see if it gets voted down or not. I'm okay with that.
Let's go ahead and vote on it. So in front of us is the original, right? Because we couldn't do the amendment. So we'll
Yep.
keep it at the $75,000 for fiscal year 24 through 28. Everybody understand that?
Just point of order.
Yes.
That is not an invalid motion. You can amend this current motion by saying 26, 27, and 28 will become 25. That's the motion. So my motion, in effect, makes it the original slide, but it doesn't deem it an invalid motion.
Okay, but can we, to move forward, can we just vote on what's in front of us and then
Mr.
we'll have
Roger?
that back?
No.
Okay.
So hopefully I can clarify this a little bit.
Yeah.
So Councilmember Ganfield made a proper motion to amend, but council didn't rule on that amendment yet. You haven't voted on that amendment yet. So that's first, and then see where that goes. If that amendment fails, we're back to Councilmember Harding's original motion.
Okay. All right, so now the.
Question, if I may?
Yes.
So, Mr. Rogers, Councilman Ganfield motioned it back to the original, is what you're saying. So if we vote and approve that, then we're done.
It's an amendment.
In effect. But no, we're not done. In effect, my motion is merely, it's augmenting his motion to become the original. If mine fails, we're back to his motion.
Yeah,
He
but if
doesn't need
it
to withdraw.
passes, then it's what is here.
No,
Okay,
we still have
no.
to pass his original motion.
Point of order.
As amended.
2 votes.
Can I say, we are right now at an amendment. The amendment is the originally stated motion in your packet, which is to lower the funding to $75,000 each year, fiscal year 24 and 25, lower the funding $75,000 each year thereafter. If this does not pass, then it'll go back to the original motion, which is $75,000 per year for fiscal year 24 through fiscal year 28. Okay, so anybody have any other questions about the amendment? Yes, Councilman Harding.
I'm totally okay with this, and I'm okay to be wrong. We can amend, so instead of saying you're changing the motion, you're just amending the amount for 3 years? Is that in essence what's going to happening? Because it seems like to me, that's why I said originally I didn't think it was procedurally appropriate, because it seemed to me just like a complete change of motion, if that makes sense.
I think it's proper because the basis, the first 2 years of 75,000 each year remains.
So
The
you
motion
can-
to amend was to lower the last 3 years from 75 to 25.
Okay.
That was the motion to amend. So that's the piece really you're deciding right now, is those 3 years lowering to 25K per year.
So that's okay, procedurally speaking?
Yes.
All right. Go ahead. I don't
And
wanna
this
waste
is
time.
separate from the
Okay.
taking away the TIF. The TIF would
We're
stay
not
at the
doing
25.
anything with the TIF. That was a side conversation.
That'll be Jen's discretion. Before we see this again.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions about this amendment to the motion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay. Okay, that amendment carries, so now we have to vote on the motion
With the
Correct.
amendment.
As amended.
as amended. So, any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, so now we will, did we have public comment? Yes, We did,
You did.
right?
I
Okay.
don't think you had any.
Sorry. Okay, so now the motion in front of us, as amended, is to lower the funding to $75,000 each year for fiscal year 24 and 25, and to lower the funding to $25,000 per year thereafter. All in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, that motion carries. Item number 7, change number 64 on the CIP. These are the resilience, what was called, is called on the CIP resilience initiatives. Council discussion and, I guess, a motion on what we're wanting on this item. Councilwoman DeBur.
I appreciated the email that we got, which said the different projects, but they never really talked about, well, what money would be saved by doing these. It just talked about projects that they had. Was that something that information that they also had that we could consider?
Do you know, Director Schrage?
I would have to look at some of those CFU energy audits, identify the building, and in this specific case, lighting. I would have to look that up, but I don't have that at hand.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure that if we're spending $25,000 a year, that we're saving more than that.
Any other council comments before we turn this over to public discussion?
Chairwoman?
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
Yep. I was looking at the packet on the other items where there's LED lighting installs, and I was just wondering, isn't this initiative covered in items like 166 and 167 and the like? And there's some efficiencies gained in item 170 as well. Are these not the same items, and why are they named all differently?
Sure. Well, that's what I mentioned earlier when we went through it, is that, you know, the one committee meeting, we took out funding in FY24, but I wanted to mention that, like you mentioned, 167, 166, there's still some energy efficiency projects happening in 24. We're just not adding on an additional 25,000. Why those are separate is because I think we knew about those, we're planning for those, they're kind of bigger dollar amounts. I think the 25 is more just a, hey, if something comes up and we need it, you know, we'll have it. So that's why those are separate.
I'd like to make a motion to change the name of it to energy efficiencies.
Second.
At this time, let's turn it over to public comment. Any public comment on this item, which is number 7? The motion is to change the name from resilience initiatives to energy efficiency projects. Any public comment? Okay, any further council comment? All right, so motion on the floor is to change name from resilience initiatives to energy efficiency projects. All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, now down to item number 8, which is number 204 on the CIP. Council, which is the SCBA replacement. And that one, I guess, council motion and discussion on this item.
Sure. Chairwoman, I would make a motion that we move item number 204 for scuba replacement to fiscal year 27 as recommended by Public Safety Director Burry.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so motion and second. Any council discussion on this item? Any public discussion on this item? Okay, any further comment before we do a voice vote here? All right, so motion to move this item to fiscal year 27 using GO 2026 bonds versus GO 2024 bonds. And this is for the SCBA replacement. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. All right, that has consensus as well. That brings us to the end of this. Any staff comments?
I thought I would just
Sure.
might do a little summary
Yep,
at
love
the
it.
end. And I just, Denny, if you can have that up on the screen here. So I think what I see based on all the motions made is that GEO funding in total would reduce now by about 900,000 because there was that extra 200,000 that was taken out. So that's about 900,000. There's 700 up there. It's about 900,000 now. The GR funding would reduce by 500,000. Originally, I thought it was going to be 225 because I thought it was only going down to 75, but because it's 25 those last year, I have that the GR funding is getting reduced by 500,000. $900,000. And then again, I think at this point, it was sending a motion forward, if someone makes a motion, to recommend to approve the CIP as amended to council.
Chairwoman,
Yes.
make a motion to recommend approval to the city council, the CIP as amended tonight.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Any further discussion? Yes, Councilwoman.
Jen, the numbers you just had on that slide, you said it was only like, what was it, 700 on there? It's actually more like 1.5 million, isn't it? With
For the
changes-
GEO?
Yeah,
So-
with the changes on slides number 57, 70, 204, the UNI, and then number 59.
So, okay, so I had that, the pool would reduce by 500,000, GO plus the 200,000, so we're at 700,000 just on the pool that GO went down, plus the 191,510 on number 57, so that's why I was saying about 900,000. And then the thing on number 204, though, is that's just sliding it back. So the GO wouldn't reduce, it's just moving a year. So that's why I didn't reduce that. Did I come up with your number then?
Still 200 off with the number 59, the placemaking. Did you have that in there too?
Yep, that's the 191.
Okay.
Yep, so again, I had, again, and we can just verify, so I had 700,000 for the pool, GO getting reduced. The 191 number for placemaking that comes up to the 891, or just about 900,000.
Okay, any further
Madam
council
Chair?
comments? Yes, Councilman Cruz.
Looking at the CIP in total, the biggest elephant in the room is the Main Street reconstruction. And
I'm gonna point of order, because that is something that's already been in contract. Am I wrong in thinking that? Staff?
That's correct. The contract has been led on that, or
So that is not part of, that's already going.
But
That's
there
not-
are change orders that are done all the time in projects like this?
That would be, I believe, a referral for a different time. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Yeah, I don't know how it would affect the CIP at this stage.
This is a planning document. As much as we've called it a budget, it's not the budget. That item is already going with contracts. So I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude, but that's not, we're getting in the weeds that we're not gonna go in right now.
I'd like to hear what he had to say.
Well, that's fine, but that's not, we can talk about that at council referrals or updates maybe with the mayor, if the mayor allows that, but we're not going into that.
I'd like to get a vote from the council to see if we can discuss this item.
If you can tell me how it would affect the CIP, I'd be open to hearing it.
The CIP is a budget item for the citizens. The components of each of these items affect their pocketbook, and the user costs that are embedded in this item would go down with the reconfiguration, a change order on 6th and Main.
But would that affect the total cost of the, are we talking about lowering?
It could.
Or changing this?
It could change the construction costs, lower the construction costs.
So I agree with Councilman Cruz that I'd like to maybe take a look at 6th Street again. I just don't think this is the time for that. I'd like to know, would it be at the referrals at the end of council meeting tonight that Daryl could bring this up? Would that be the proper way to go after this?
That's where I think it would be most appropriate. If we're talking about the CIP with regard to dollars that we would have to increase the project on, I think this would be the appropriate venue. But if we're not talking about the project cost as shown in here going up or down, I don't know that when we get into the details of the project and what's gonna, if the overall cost hasn't increased, I don't know that we need to speak about it at the CIP.
Mr. Cruz, are you?
Well, I'm okay with that if everybody else is okay with it.
I think it'd be more appropriate personally.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe we had a motion and a second, correct, for the motion to recommend approval at city council meeting for CIP as presented or as amended. Let's do a voice vote. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
All right, so consensus is given. Anything else that staff needs at this point? Okay, then I don't think, do we need, yes, Councilman Schultz?
Jen, just for clarification for some folks, how did we come out on the pool?
So the pool stayed at 8 million, except there was 500,000 of GO that's not going to be funded with economic development.
So I'm interested in these young ladies right here.
Sure.
Do they?
8 million. The pool's still being funded at 8 million.
It's just how we pay for it.
It's just
So
how-
are you good with that? Are you all good with that? Okay.
So-
All right. I've just seen a lot of blank looks this whole meeting, and it wasn't just from up here.
Okay.
I assume we'll have a 15-minute recess before the
Could I have
council meeting?
a quick question
That'd be
for
great.
Director Rodebeck?
Yeah.
So we do the CIP, we move it forward, we vote on it at the regular council session. Then you take that and work it into the budget, and then we file that with the state of Iowa by March 31st, or can you?
The budget, correct.
Can you
So-
explain this next?
Sure. So what we do is, once we have a CIP, is we take the FY '24 column, and we will take those amounts and put them in the budget, the appropriate place. You know, if it's the zoning, it's gonna go in the planning budget under general revenue. If it's the TIF, it's going into the TIF bond. It's in the '24 budget. So, the point being is, just like last year, you may recall, you still have an opportunity in anything funded in FY '24, you still have an opportunity to see it again come budget time. It's not, it just gives us a starting point to know, okay, generally, these are you guys' priorities for projects, so we'll put those in the budget. But again, you can review them again by the budget, so.
And maybe just to add on to that, so after tonight's meeting, there's 4 council meetings left to move forward and get the budget approved. And in that particular time period, we need to have 2 public hearings. So the window's getting pretty tight to get a budget approved by the end of March.
So when you're doing the budget, you end up zeroing in on the millage rate,
Correct. Yep.
and then that dictates property tax.
Mhm.
You have consideration in there, I'm assuming, for the valuations of real estate in Cedar Falls
Correct.
going sky high, or, well, up 20, 30%, whatever.
I don't think they did that.
There was some bidding wars through the year, but,
Okay.
anyway.
To move on,
But
so we
that
can get to
is
our
the
council
millage rate.
meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All right, we are adjourned. I think we'll probably need 10 minutes or so.
Take 10 minutes.
10 minutes, and we'll be back. Thank you.